When we were first entering some of these towns, the rumors in the market were that we were just coming in to mine for gold and just be an extractor and not
Remember that
contribute
for
anything.
yeah.
There was a lot of fear in the market.
Welcome back, investor, to another episode of the Passive Income Adventures, where we teach you how to take more adventures and how to pay for 'em with time and money so you don't get sucked into the scams and traps of passive income that we often see online. So I appreciate you being with me today. My guest is Adam Jason.
Thank you so much, Emma. Pleasure to be here.
Now, let's just go right into you telling our investor, our listener, more about you, where you're coming from, your backstory, your pain points, pivot points. Like, we're not living exactly what I would call a standard mainstream lifestyle. So we want to hear about how you got into this stuff and what makes you you.
Sure. I agree with you. I don't think most things in life go according to plan. So, originally from Buffalo, New York, but now talking to you from Medellin, South America, in Colombia.
Nice.
Yeah, not exactly where I expected to end up, but I've been here now for 6 years. Attorney by background, practiced in the US for about 8 years before coming down to Colombia. I was a capital markets attorney, so working for Fortune 500 companies, the big Wall Street banks, doing IPOs, raising a bunch of money, advising boards of directors, and really got to a point in my career where I had to make the decision of, do I want to be a partner in the law firm? Do I want to go in-house and work with one of our clients? Or do I want to do something a little bit more entrepreneurial? I had never done really much any traveling growing up. My background is pretty simple. Our vacations were like an hour from home. Maybe we go to the beach. So it was not didn't grow up with that mindset, but had an opportunity between a job that I was working at in Dallas and a new offer that I got in Houston to take a month and do some traveling. Just wanted to see the world a little bit and go someplace and actually try and live there versus going for a week, moving around a bunch. So heard good things about Colombia, was learning a little bit of Spanish at the time, ended up coming down here, spending a month, saw a lot of opportunity, chances for passive investment as well as to build businesses, fell in love with what the potential was, and it aligned nicely with what I want to do with my career. So, as I mentioned, been down here for about 6 years now. We built an investment firm called Legacy Group that houses portfolio companies that we either build ourselves or that we invest in passively, I would say, but do some kind of advisory work with some of the businesses that we're involved in. And our main kind of our baby is the green coffee company. So right now it's the largest coffee producer in all of Colombia. We started the business from nothing in 2017, brought in about $75 million dollars from approximately 500 high net worth investors, accredited investors, mostly in the US, but folks in Colombia, internationally. And we really built the business on the idea that we could take a group of investors who were already comfortable primarily with real estate and with Colombia and give them an additional option for their portfolio, and also do something that had some real opportunity for scale and kind of to derive enterprise value and really build something interesting that probably exceeds the potential of most real estate opportunities. On the ground here in Colombia, building businesses, trying to give passive investment opportunities to other folks on a global basis and do something interesting that people are excited about. That's my story.
Yeah, that was a lot in a little nutshell. So I have a couple of
Mm.
questions about that.
Of course.
First thing I'm thinking is, you remember when I was a kid and there were all those Colombian coffee commercials? And I realized even from a very young age that Colombian coffee was the coffee. So the fact that you have the largest coffee company in Colombia,
Yeah,
did I hear that? That's,
you
that's
did.
a,
Yeah, it's actually it's a weird market in the sense that it's incredibly fragmented. About 95% of the coffee growers here in Colombia own less than 5 acres.
mm,
Right now we have over 10,000. What you traditionally see is small family businesses, one person operations, owning a little bit of land, farming the coffee, selling to co-ops that then sell to aggregators and then sell it in bulk further down the value chain. So to somebody like a Starbucks or whomever. So the Juan Valdez and the
yeah.
reputation of coffee in Colombia and everything you're familiar with has really been set at the intermediary stage of the coffee chain, really by the coffee union here in Colombia that invested a lot in advertising and whatnot, really over the last 50 years. But in terms of production and folks that are actually taking coffee out of the ground, it's very fragmented.
Mm,
So we were able to reach that number one position relatively quickly because it's really not, people doing it at scale is not something you often see here.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So we're talking about all along the chain, the value add chain so you're basically taking up that largest designation as the largest grower producer, like frontline.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly. Largest farmer.
Yeah.
And then we always try and add, it's really hard to make money just as a farmer selling commodity products. So the next stages for our business are really filling in a lot of places in that value chain. So one, taking out a lot of the intermediaries that currently exist, but then also getting really far down the value chain ourselves in terms of selling roasted coffee. So the coffee that you're used to buying in the supermarket. And then something really innovative that we're doing, which I think is exciting and worth talking about, is the history of Colombian coffee. If you think back to those Juan Valdez commercials that you saw, it was Juan Valdez and the donkey climbing the mountains in Colombia, picking the cherries by hand. Inside the cherry is the bean, outside is the pulp, the skin, everything. And all of that has really been thrown in the garbage, discarded, become a pollutant, etc. Nobody's ever really done anything with it. So we pride ourselves in really being innovative in the space and thinking about how do we maximize the value of every coffee cherry, the form that it grows in the trees. How do we maximize the value of every coffee that we pick? So I have next to me, if people are watching this kind of on video, we've taken the cherry, distilled it into ethanol, and then created a vodka. And we also have a gin. These are not half full because I've been drinking them, but people in the office tend to come and have them. So we're really trying to create value with everything that we take off the coffee trees and do something different. It's historically been an industry where, as much as the world knows about Colombia and coffee, the investment has never really been here. There's never been enough money generated at the farm level to really build, consolidate. So that's where we saw the opportunity, was bring some capital in, bring I'd say more of an international mindset to the sector and really try and do something special. And we've been able to get that leg up on a lot of, call it competitors here, but people who are more stuck in that traditional, we're just going to farm coffee and sell it in its kind of raw format.
Mhm. Yeah, commodities farmers. My husband grew up in Idaho, where he's surrounded by commodities farmers, and some of them were very wealthy, and a lot of them were not. So I really feel luck of the draw there.
For sure.
You said something interesting at the beginning where you were talking about coming to that crossroads of having to make the choice. And you mentioned a couple of things like you want to become a partner in the law firm, do you want to be more entrepreneurial? I'm curious, the
Yeah.
choices that you listed, why those choices? A lot of people are not sitting here thinking, a lot of times they think, should I go out on my own? But
Yeah.
how did you arrive at that series of choices or that set of choices?
Yeah. I guess it's just a natural progression of kind of the big law firm world in the US. So usually it's about a 7 to 10 year timeline to become a partner after you start at the firm. And then I think, at least for me, once you make that decision, if you're going to do it, there's a little bit of a lock in. You're going to start building a client base. And I could see ahead of me kind of the life and the lifestyle of a lot of the folks who had made that decision to become partners. And really, they say it's 7 to 10 years to become a partner, but it's 20 years to really have the benefits of being a partner. It's a lot of, my friend at the law firm used to say that the winner of the pie eating contest just gets more pie.
Yeah.
So I think those first 12 years of being a partner at the law firm is really just more of the same. And I just felt personally like I had extracted the value I was wanting to get from that experience and was just looking for something a little different. And I liked the entrepreneurial element and also the freedom element that could come with it if it were successful. We still have a lot of responsibilities. We have a lot of bosses in the sense that look at all of our investors as someone we're reporting to and responsible to. But what I've enjoyed on the entrepreneurial side of things versus the partner at the law firm is just the ability sometimes to take a step back, think about strategy. It's not a pure execution type position where it's just go the whole time. I like to stop, think, figure out the best way to get things done versus just repeating what's been done in the past. And I'm oversimplifying it. Of course, it's not as if that the attorneys don't have any need for creativity or what have you, but I like the ability of taking something from nothing and trying to build.
Yeah, that's really interesting because we all know a lot of attorneys and some of them love their jobs and some of them don't love their jobs. And it seems like that decision that we make in our early 20s, that this is what we have to do the rest of our careers, is almost like asking somebody whose executive function isn't fully formed to make the most
Yeah.
important life decisions they've got in front of them.
Yeah. Really, you ask people to decide when they're like 17 or 18, which is crazy to me as well. But yes, absolutely. There's always time to change, though.
Yeah, I've changed careers several times. My recent iteration, I think, was at age 40, 41, where I got into real estate
Nice.
marketing. And I felt like I had left a very physical business behind. I was a wedding photographer and I was
Oh, wow.
starting to have some physical issues with my wrists and my knees. And when we moved after my husband was laid off from the IT industry, I had that same crossroads where I was like, okay, do I want to restart a new wedding photography business in this new location? And it doesn't really make that great of money, and I've been doing it for 10 years, so I felt like, "Oh, I could be good at I could be really good at this," but I'm like, "I don't really wanna scale the business," and so I
Right.
sit back and think, like, "Where do I fall along the value add chain, and where do my skills have the best potential to make the most amount of money?" Because
Sure.
I've taken a lot of time away from my kids and doing those kind of things if I wasn't gonna get paid really well for it, and that was where
Right.
I came along, but I remember
Right.
my
Great.
basically did the same thing to me. He said, "I wanna be an engineer." He had an electronics degree, a technical degree. He came over to work one day, and we'd only been married like a year and a half. I think we just had our first baby. She was a few weeks old. And he came in from his new job and he said, "Watch what those engineers do all day." And I'm like, "I don't wanna do that." I just remember sitting there thinking, "You just had a baby,
Yeah.
crisis of career choice." And so
Yeah.
that experience, like he was in his early 20s and had fortunately figured out pretty quick that he wasn't gonna go to engineering school and really had to pivot there. So I always find that journey really interesting because he and I both have, we all have experiences with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Seems like you both made the right decision, though. That's awesome.
Yeah. Do you ever look okay, so we travel full time, but we haven't hit international yet. My kids have made it pretty clear that they're not interested in that. And yeah, talk a little bit about that lifestyle choice because a lot of people hear about it. We interviewed someone recently. She lives in Costa Rica with her kids full time. And I showed them
Okay.
and they're like, no, not doing that. So they just they're
Right.
not interested. So how are you making it work internationally? And then an international business on top of it.
Yeah. Um, I've had a great experience. Like I said, I've been here 6 years. If I didn't want to be here, I wouldn't be here. It's not all rosy. There's challenges.
Yeah.
Of course, you got to learn the language. You got to learn how things work. There's cultural differences. Colombia, for anybody who's been here, is fairly developed, but it still has room to evolve for sure. At the same time, it's given me an amazing wife, an amazing business, a business partner who a lifetime partner for things we want to do together and create. Yeah, there's challenges, but there's also exciting opportunities, new things, new learning experiences, and see where life goes from here.
Yeah. What are some of your top experiences that you've had there that you would say, let's do this on both sides? The rosiest ones, like you said, your wife and your business partner. What are some other really top ones that you're like, I could not have done this anywhere else? And then on the flip side,
Mm,
some of the ones that made you really doubt your decision.
yeah, but starting with kind of the doubt side is there's just not like oftentimes there's not like the go culture that we have in
Well,
the US
yeah.
where people are often, especially from the world I came from, fortunately, where people are like super dependable every time was exceeding expectations.
Mhm.
That's not always of top value and priority here in Colombia. There's very much a like mañana culture, people say. So like, oh, okay, we'll do it tomorrow, whatever. But you just learn to adjust, that same mindset, if you can get used to it and deal with kind of some of the frustrations that come with it, also do create a lot of opportunity. So your point of what could I have not done anywhere else? I don't know that we would have been able to get to the scale and the level of kind of where we want to be as a farmer in Idaho, for
Yeah.
example. The reason the opportunity existed here is because of that underinvestment that's been going on forever and people not really having access to capital, not really thinking about things in an international way. So yeah, without being here, these opportunities would have never come. And I'm not sure if I'd have kind of the bright, at least the way I see it, future that I think we do have. It's like everything, the good with the bad.
Yeah. What about your convoy? Your combines don't cost $500,000.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
One of the things I do like about commodities, not that I grow any, but from a business standpoint, And this is the same thing I like about real estate is that you're pretty sure that if you grow a coffee bean or potatoes or wheat, you have a market for that. I know that if I buy a building and I buy it in a location where people actually live and actually want it, then I'm going to have an easy time selling those units out as rentals to either people there
Hmm.
or business people who want to do business there. For me, it's just like this easy rinse and repeat. I say easy, that's not the right word, but the concept is there doesn't have to be like the next great thing. I don't really have to think about the value add scale, the chain. I can just keep rinse and repeat, keep doing the same business over and over again. And one of the reasons I get a little
That's right.
scared of entrepreneurship is that if you don't have the next best thing or the great idea, like tech startup world, where do you fall in line with that? Like the old reliable commodity versus trying to bring new products to market and have great new ideas that you're not sure if they're going to work or not.
Yeah, I think when you're dealing with a commodity, like you said, there's a market for it. So coffee, for example, next to petroleum is the second most traded commodity on earth. So there's always a market for it. And then it becomes how do you, I guess where the entrepreneurial element comes in is how do you make it more valuable than just a commodity? And it can start with little tweaks, right? What kind of certifications do you have? Is it a fair trade coffee? Are you doing things that are sustainable at the farms where you get a couple of extra pennies on the commodity coffee on a per pound basis, right? And then you say, how much further down the value chain can I go? Can I transform the product into something that becomes more entrepreneurial, right? Is there a product market fit, to use that term from tech space, et cetera, that you mentioned is, can I turn this commodity into a consumer product that people are going to really enjoy? Can we take the coffee cherry and create a market around vodka that comes from that coffee cherry? So it's great. I think like real estate, as you mentioned, that you have a downside. You can map that in your head, right? We're buying land, we're buying buildings to process the coffee. And then you have that commodity market as a baseline, both for coffee and if we're talking about ethanol that trades as well, like a commodity, just like real estate. You go into these properties and the idea is, how can I create a new value proposition? How can I increase the hospitality level? How can I do value add so I can charge higher rents? All those additional things that you say, okay, here's my baseline, but how do I make this even more attractive to the customer? How do I increase the demand for this? How do I do something different and unique? And ultimately, how do I generate higher returns?
Yeah, that's a really good point because I use the term value add in what I do pretty much every property we buy. We're like, where's the value add? At the
Sure.
same time, I feel like as a business, I don't like being in the have to outsmart the competitor. I just have to have
Right.
good, clean product. The value add we do, you make a good point. Like I'm really into increasing the management efficiency of a property using IT
Right.
solutions. My husband's from a tech background. My dad was a software developer back in the 70s.
Right.
So I grew up seeing how technology could make things more efficient, more affordable. But sometimes we have a bad
For sure.
market fit because it's a smaller community or a little more rural and people are more handshake type of a personality. And then they're like, I don't know how to do this fancy online payment stuff. And so sometimes
Right.
like a mismatch in the demographic almost. And we have to think about like, where are we going to be a best fit? You can't just go in and put those kinds of improvements on every business because there's going to be a resistance.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yes, interesting. So most of our listeners tend to be a little bit on the newer side of investing. They may have done a couple of syndications or passive investments one or two, three times before, but a lot of them, they're contemplating their first foray out into the space. And real estate is
Yep.
one of those things that's nice and stable and boring, like we mentioned, and they feel like, oh, they get really great tax benefits of it. So let's talk to the investor directly, like that accredited investor that both of us are really we're
Sure.
messaging towards, and talk to
Sure.
them about the benefits and the challenges that come with investing with a project like what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah, I made this mistake before. I told you I'm originally from Buffalo. I bought single family homes there, tried to build a little portfolio there, some properties in Cleveland. And I think the promise of
Easy money, no
that being
headache.
some kind of passive business is not accurate at all. I think that the only way really to do it, even if you're saying I'm gonna hire managers and people are gonna do this for me, you still gotta manage the managers. So it's a lot. So that was a mistake I made. I really realized like the benefits of scale and having resources and being able to have the infrastructure around you to make things like truly passive, as people use that term, like meaning you don't really have to do anything except collect checks. Easier said than done.
Yeah.
I think some of the opportunities out there facilitate that are large scale syndications where you really have the team, but you got to do the work up front, right? You got to do the track record. You got to understand the value proposition versus the price that you're paying. But then once you've made the decision, if things go well, it should be fairly passive. We try to do the same thing similar to syndications, except we're giving people the opportunity to invest in businesses themselves. And we run the businesses, we report to the investors. They don't do anything except send the money after they've done their due diligence process and hopefully serve as good cheerleaders as we continue to build and grow. But yeah, I think it's just and I know you do this and discuss this with your audience of really understanding what's passive and what's not passive. And I think the value we try to provide is to really create that kind of passive opportunity for folks where they're really not dedicating time, effort, and anything be it that distracts them from other opportunities that they're pursuing.
Yeah, I learned this message the hard way from someone close to me who had a very successful business and he invested everything back into the business and eventually sold it to somebody who embezzled from it. And the business
Mm,
came to a flaming halt. And he
mm,
said that he felt beholden to his employees, that if he didn't put every ounce
hmm
of effort and money into this business and he lost it, then everybody would lose their jobs. And he said, I never invested in myself. I never invested in my own portfolio. He just had his retirement account stuff. But he said, I never bought any houses. I never bought into anybody else's business. And he said, I really have put all my eggs into one basket. And it was a great big basket that fed him well for a while. And then it started to fall apart. And so he learned the diversification lesson the hard way and never
yeah.
was able to recover from that in a meaningful way. And
Mm,
so I feel like I preach the gospel of commercial real estate, but I diversified all sorts of things. And I think it's sometimes fun to talk about some of the stuff I've invested in that people are like, oh, really? Like you're in a sport
sure.
where you invested in a farm or whatnot.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about diversification because I feel like there's this balance of active income where you really need to be an expert at what you do, eat, breathe, and drink that industry or that product. And then the passive diversification, but there's that temptation to keep investing everything into our own businesses and become
Yeah.
overexposed to that.
Honestly, that's what I do. So I right now I'm in the building mode. I want to build our business. I see a lot of opportunity. Will it be a mistake? I don't think so. But yeah, you can't control everything. Unfortunate situation that you mentioned with your friend, but almost essentially pour everything that we make back in the business. Believe in the upside with it. I guess I'm a little bit anti diversification. I think it's easy to get diluted if you're doing too many different
Mhm.
things, at least, especially when you're spreading across like different asset classes, different sectors, different geographies, easy to chase the next thing.
Yeah.
So I try to stay focused on what I can control, but I don't at all think that what we're doing is passive. We're really building and create opportunities for other people. So that's where I'm focused. But yeah, I've taken basically all the money I've made prior to this life and this life as a living here in Colombia and building businesses and put it into what we're doing. So I wish I could be more in sync with what you're preaching, but I'm a little bit inconsistent with that. Just betting on ourselves as much as possible, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I want to go all in on what we're doing.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. And one of the reasons I bring it up is because we have so many entrepreneurs who listen to the show and they're
Yeah,
all like, they're maybe a little farther along where they're looking at a sale or they're looking at an exit. And maybe they've even been
yeah,
planning for an exit, like getting the business gussied up, like when you're selling a house and you want to get a new page up
right.
and all of that. But they haven't really thought about, okay, after I sell this business, then what? Not just lifestyle wise, but investment wise. And so they're usually a little
Yeah,
further down that chain where they're in their late 40s, mid to late 40s. And they're, okay, I don't think I can keep doing this till I'm 65. Or even if they can, they just have to, they've seen people get sick. They've seen people get hurt. They've seen people pass away early. They've seen things and they're starting to think along those lines. And so you're more in the space right now of providing the passive opportunities for people who are
correct.
more in wrap up phases, which is can be its own type of passion that where you are right now.
Exactly. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, and I think for me because I got started in this so much later in life, I was already past 40 when I started in it, and I really had to start thinking about how are we going to balance this out? And diversification being that hedge against ignorance.
Sure.
It's
Yeah, there's that. There is that.
yeah, you can't be an expert at everything. So I think there's a delicate balance
Right.
between over dilution, like you mentioned, and all the eggs in one basket. And people usually around my age start to think about, okay, I've been pouring everything into this business for 15 or 20 years. And how
Yep.
do I get, so it's, would you say that's mostly your investor as well? People who are really interested in what it is that you're doing?
Yeah, I'd say our average investor is 35 to 55, looking for cool opportunities, a chance at a bigger exit versus I want consistent cash flow because we really take all of our profits and roll them back into the business.
Hmm.
Our investors are investing under the hope based on our own goals that we get to an IPO for the business in 2026, where we can generate some real kind of meaningful returns. So we're raising some capital right now. We just started a raise for $15 million. We got about 6 million left, and the goal is to 5x that money in a couple of years. So we're really trying to let people come in at a low valuation and blow things out at the top end by getting public in the US. But yeah, it's a business where people say Colombia and coffee. I can wrap my head around
Yeah.
that. Most of our investors are real estate investors, and they say, okay, you have a lot of assets, relatively low debt to equity. I can feel comfortable with that. There's a cash flow component to the business. We're actually generating profits and putting them back into the business. So people like that. It's less of I want to bet on a kind of tech startup type deal where it's more venture based and it can go to zero or it can go to whatever. Our folks are in that like wheelhouse of I don't want to take chances where I think I could lose all my money and I'll give up some of the 1,000x return potential, but I want to see some good returns come. And they want a premium because they're investing in Colombia and that's different for a lot of people. The business is based in the US, but all of our operations are conducted here. So people want that risk premium for doing something outside of commercial real estate in the US that requires a little bit more of people associate more risk to it, whether that's fair or not. So yeah, that's our makeup for investors, really high net worth folks looking for new opportunities, whether it's geographically or to invest in businesses versus my advisor tells me to put all my money in the stock market. And they just like what we're doing. People can come see the farms, get their hands on the product, try the coffee. It gives them a cool story to tell at cocktail parties also.
Yeah. And so the risk profile that you mentioned, that one's really interesting because I feel like these private investments are so much less regulated and you're going the opposite direction. You're going into the more
Yeah.
regulated space of the IPO where you basically
Yeah.
have to open every aspect of the business up to regulation
Yeah.
that you can get included on the exchange. And that extra risk tends to go away once that IPO is there. And so I like how you talk about that area that you are between you want higher returns than what you may have been. So you're coming in that gap between real estate investors who are used to that 2x in 5 years and the venture investor who's used to 1,000 or zero.
Yeah.
Or how long, and coming into that middle ground where you're able to offer higher returns. And like you said, maybe slightly higher risk. I think a lot of that higher risk may come from the fact that you're international, the fact that you're as yet not a publicly traded asset, but at the same time, you don't want to be in that venture risk category. Commodities are fairly safe bet, especially like you said, people understand Colombian coffee. And so can you speak to
Yeah.
us a little bit about that type of investor? Like ours are usually pretty new. It's either their first, second, sometimes third real estate syndication when they invest with us. Where are they coming along the chain by the time they're interested in actually wiring over to something like what you're doing?
Yeah, I'd say it runs the gamut. We work with a lot of investor groups where people hear about opportunities from one another and they might be just starting their journey or they might be really far along. And we're talking about big checks, 5, $6 million. And then newer folks maybe test the waters a little bit with 100, $200,000 and come in at first opportunity. Most people are familiar with syndications. Maybe they run syndications themselves. A lot of time it's rolling over profits from other opportunities into what we're doing. Most of them are fairly knowledgeable when it comes to structuring IRAs. We have folks that ask really good questions and really do their homework. So a lot of entrepreneurs, so people that know what it takes to build a business, know what to look for when they're doing their diligence, know what to ask of call it the operator or the company itself. So it really runs the gamut, but I'd say it's folks who have usually done a couple of projects at least on their own or in the syndication format, and they see an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, I definitely find that investing in businesses is most people's first stop, actually. Our investors will often say they've invested in a tech startup or something and then it doesn't cash flow. And I don't
Okay.
see that money again. And then they realize, oh, maybe that was a little too risky and I wasn't thinking about risk and cash flow. And they'll back up a little bit into something that's a little more risk stable, like real estate. So I was
Right.
curious, like how that person tends to come into your ecosystem. Where do you meet most of the investors that you do business with? Because you're in Colombia and in-person meetings are so vital to attracting investors. So
Yeah.
how do you go about that?
Yeah, we work with a lot of, as I mentioned, investor groups. So active participation in those. So masterminds, kind of groups where folks get together and look at deals together. We have a lot of conversations like this through podcasts and other folks who are talking about the same things that we are. Honestly, we've gotten a lot of family, friends, close connection investment in the business. What we're doing, I have my wife, my uncle, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, friends from childhood, whoever. We've cobbled things together as we've gone. And one person tells another. We get a lot of interested referrals. We put out a lot of content on social media, which attracts interest. And it's really just telling the story to anybody who will listen on a daily basis, trying to get a few touch points and keep people excited. But yeah, it's not always easy to find the right audience and find the right niche. But we do a lot of the in-person stuff as well. We have folks who come down to Colombia and visit us. We take them out to the farms. We'll do some investor events there just so they can see either what they put their money in or where they might place some capital in the future. So we try to give people an opportunity to really see the business up close and personal. And then it's a lot of repeat investors. We know the importance of communication given the market we're in and people wanting to know what's going on with their capital. So we send out weekly newsletters, updates. We do quarterly webinars. We do an annual letter with audited financial statements. We do a presentation with all of our management team, board of directors. So we try to be, I'd say, overly communicative so people are really confident in what's going on and they get the information they demand to, again, get over that hurdle of I'm sending my money to a business that's not operating usually in the country that I'm from. So that's what we have to take on, but it's fun. We got a great network, 500 people. It's exciting to see how many people have come on to what we're doing, and it's rewarding for sure.
Yeah, communication is so important. It's where most indicators, it's a private company and they
Yeah,
do a very good job. Sometimes they do a good job up front before somebody invests and then it tapers off afterwards.
sure.
What are some ways that you reassure potential investors that the communication is going to be there after they invest?
Yeah, a lot of it comes because of the referrals. So people say, hey, often one of the best referrals is these people are really communicative, right? That'll be something that people really cite when they say, yeah, I know what's going on. So we have an investor portal. We have a media team that does a lot of videos from the farms, interviews the teams. We're very open with the financial statements. We're very open with the Q&A, kind of available all the time for questions from investors. Responsiveness, timeliness are super important. And then it just snowballs. People tell one another that whatever their concerns are about Colombia, what have you, these guys are at least telling me what's going on and letting me know how my investment is progressing.
So, what are the most normal things that you put investor dollars to work for? Like just pretty average, typical stuff that this is the bread and butter investment coming in that we need to sustain operations.
Yeah, we've had to buy a lot of land, obviously, to support with it 10,000 acres now, about 13 million coffee trees. So we've invested in, it's really simple, like the real estate analogy would be farms that have been passed down through generations that are somewhat in distress and in need of renovation
Mhm.
so that we can optimize the production. So we buy farms usually from third, fourth generation farmers. It gets passed down to the kid who wants to go live someplace else. They don't want to be a coffee farmer. They don't want to climb the mountains here in Colombia and take coffee off the trees.
Yeah.
So we're happy to take it off their hand, and it usually requires investment. We've also focused the weakness in the sector, in the industry, has been the decentralization and the fragmentation of processing for coffee farmers around the country. So what we usually have is small farmer, 5 acres, they build their own processing facility. Technology is 80 years old,
Mm.
super inefficient, a lot of waste, often damages the coffee, etc. What we wanted to do was build nexuses of innovation that really come down to how do we process coffee? How do we adapt technology from other sectors, things like olives and whatnot, where we can better process the coffee that we're using. So we invest a lot in technology, which results in efficiencies, which results in cost savings for to the business. So that even if we're selling coffee on a commodity basis, we can make a spread. For most coffee farmers, their cost of production is pretty close to the market price. We try to spread that gap, and then as we go further down the value chain, we can realize even more kind of benefits of scale. The infrastructure we invest in and what we're raising capital for now is really going to go towards the distillery operation that we're putting in place. So to produce the ethanol from the coffee cherry, it really requires full scale distillery. We built a test facility. That's where the bottles that I showed you came from. We can do about 10 liters a day on a test basis. The new facility we're building is $8 million, and we'll be doing 12,000 liters of pure ethanol a day, which is about 25,000 standard bottles of vodka on a daily basis. So it's a huge build out. We want to find a way to use all that waste and really do something value add. So it's investing in the foundations, which are the farms, good farming practices, make sure we process the coffee, and then the innovation side of things too, where we put some capital to work to really try and do something unique and different.
I've never heard of distilling like coffee-based spirits before. Is this something that other people have experimented with in your scaling, or was this an original idea? Where did that come from?
Really, it was looking at the piles of waste
Yeah.
or the piles of the coffee cherry that were coming through the processing facilities and say, oh my God, what can we do with this? And then it's honestly just stealing ideas from other industries. So if you look at corn in the US, if you look at oil and gas, it's always, what do we do with the byproducts, right? How do we create other subproducts from the main product? And we said, let's try and do the same thing. So we invested in research and development with some of the universities here. It's also a topic that's been studied internationally. So there's some research institutions out of Germany that have looked at this, but they said, all right, this cherry contains a bunch of sugar, a bunch of fiber, proteins. There's value there. When you're creating ethanol, it's really just taking anything with sugar and distilling it down. So you can create ethanol from sugar itself if you put it through the distillation process. So the high sugar count in the cherries provides the base for being able to create the ethanol.
Yeah. And there's so much there for people who want to invest in something that's more sustainable. Like you said, it's the largest, after oil and gas, the largest traded commodity in the world. And you have piles of waste and old technology. It's, we're from Texas, so we're driving through refinery territory and they're flaring that natural gas. And it just hurts so bad to watch that disappear into the air like that. And so we're coming in and coming up with technologies on how to capture that and use that byproduct, like you said, from the oil and gas industry. That's just as very innovative. Do you know any competitors in that space?
There's really nobody. People have looked at what do we do with this cherry, but really at a small scale. The issue you often run into is if you don't process the stuff in 24 hours, it starts to rot. Once it rots, it's over.
Okay.
Because of all this decentralized infrastructure where these farmers have small facilities, small quantities, they don't have the capital, one, to invest in the research and development to figure this out. And two, they don't really have ways for maintaining the product in a stable format long enough to actually turn it into something. So the scale of the business has given us the leverage to be able to do that. And right now there's nobody competing with us. Our target market for the end products is here in Colombia. If you look at the market itself for gins, vodkas, what have you, there's really no national product in those spaces. Everything that's either gins or vodka is imported. So the price point starts at the absolute vodka, that tier. So you're talking about $20 a bottle. Most of the folks here are used to drinking kind of $10, $12 type products, but nobody's able to hit those price points because of the cost of import, all the other costs that go into that. So we think it's a unique opportunity to take a byproduct from the national product of the country and turn it into something that people have some pride around when they drink. We'll see what the market response is to that. As I mentioned, we're really just testing it out and getting that going. But in our minds, it makes sense. So we're willing to take the investment risk and try and build it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I know for my brewer friends, trying to find a consistent way to dump the spent grains into animal feed production because it runs so fast, and there's just no real way to do it at scale unless you own the spent grains and the pig farm that's going to be eating.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, that full integration. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
it makes a difference when time is of the essence and finding that
It
reliable
is.
supply. You've got it right there, and you can get to it quickly before the product starts to degrade. So that's
That's right. That's the idea.
yeah, and in an increasingly niched environment where people are niching down harder and harder, it's almost like you have this really niche product like coffee cherry spirits, but at the same time, you can't be so niche down. You have to be vertically integrated between those two things. So it's not this beautiful combination of ultra niching and vertical integration at the same time.
Yeah, one of the challenges we're going to have, I think, on the marketing front around the product is making it clear or avoiding confusion that it actually tastes like coffee, right? It doesn't taste like coffee at all. It's just the sugars that are distilled down. It tastes like a pure ethanol. So it will become very niche if people are associated with this is like a coffee liqueur or something that I buy once and it sits on my shelf forever. This is meant to be like a call it an everyday type consumable item. And yeah, I think one, Colombia provides a good market for it because if we try to tell that story internationally, I'm not sure how many people will care.
Yeah.
And also, you have markets like the US, more developed markets that are super saturated with product right now, right? From craft beers to craft liquors to all kind non-alcoholic is a big category now. All these different arenas where people are playing. And we just say, look, let's look at what's right in front of us and what's wide open and try and just be first in that space and kind of capture a position in the consumer's mind and see what we can build from there. So the idea is to not make it super niche, but make it a story that people can identify with. Call it like the cult brand type mentality of I drink this because I'm this kind of person and this is how I feel about my country and I take great pride in it. I'm maybe a coffee farmer myself. A lot of the coffee that comes into our operation is coffee that we buy from other farmers around us. So a lot of them will have their coffee represented in the end product. Like we will use their coffee cherries to create the vodka. So I think it's a cool thing for somebody to say, I bought this and I think my cherries might be in that bottle. So it's a good way to build a connection. And I just don't think people in Miami or New York or Pennsylvania or Texas will really care that much. We'll see how things grow.
Yeah, that sustainability and that use of a otherwise useless byproduct, I think that I the impact investing and sustainable investing is huge in North America. And I've heard
Yeah.
foreign investors from Israel and other areas talk about, I don't get social impact investing. Like, what's wrong with you Americans? So, and it's
Yeah.
not a thing that they understand why we'd be willing to pay more for a product or to invest in a company that does this. But in North America, from an investor standpoint, I can see how that is huge. But also from a consumer standpoint, it's like those North American marketing efforts almost need to be different than what's going to the Colombian market because we care more
Yeah.
what sheep grows the wool in our sweater.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. I mean, the consumer preferences are definitely changing. We see it in coffee. There's more movement away from Folgers, chock full of nuts. I don't care anything. I just want a caffeine jolt in the morning. I'm going to make a big pot of coffee and half of it I'm going to pour down the drain. There's that movement into more of a craft type mindset, but also looking at like the story behind the coffee. Even people challenging like the Starbucks of the world and people who talk a lot about sustainability to test whether what they say they're doing is something that they're actually doing. So I think it's first and foremost, the sustainability efforts have to be value add to the business, right? We're not a charity,
yeah.
but we think that everything we're trying to do ultimately adds value in a couple ways. One, it makes the business more valuable because consumers want to work with businesses that are doing things in a sustainable way. And those that don't really care, they're not going to punish you for it. Right? There's no like downside to doing it as long as it doesn't affect your cost so much where it's impacting the business in a material way. And then you get those premiums on the products by telling the right story. It also really, I think, is critical for generating a loyalty at the employee base and with the communities that we have here where people say, okay, that's a business I want to work for versus the traditional coffee farming operation where there's no benefits. They don't have any health care. There's no social security plan. There's no pension. All of those benefits we've given to our employees so that we keep a loyal base. And then it adds value. You tell the story as you go further down the value chain. And people ultimately, the idea being, will actually pay for that value add that you're creating. So it's really that full kind of circular economy of doing things the right way. I'll tell you too, it's an interesting, if you come down to Colombia and you go to some of these small coffee towns, you're going to see really a mindset that is 100 years old. People are not comfortable with change. People are very set in their ways. So when you have, call it a couple of gringos to come down here and start putting some money into the market, changing the way things are run, hiring some folks and doing things differently, there's a lot of skepticism,
Mhm.
right? So people are looking at what's the weakness here. When we were first entering some of these towns, the rumors in the market were that we were just coming in to mine for gold and just be an extractor and not
Cover that
contribute
first.
anything.
Yeah.
There was a lot of fear in the market. So if we don't do things the right way, we have a target on our backs to be the first one that people want to call out for being hypocrites or whatever, or just being the foreigners in quotes that come here and try to take things away versus giving things back. So there's a lot of reasons to do things the right way. We're not perfect, make mistakes. We can always improve things. How do we dispose of materials better and do those things? But it's a top priority for us from a reputational perspective, from growing the business financially to making it worthwhile for investors and also just being proud of it. My wife's Colombian. I don't want to be the one that is on the news for not doing the right things, and she's got to be married to me. So we're trying to do some good while also making some money and building a business we're proud of.
Yeah, I find this fascinating. I've actually never drank coffee and I have never drank alcohol.
Oh boy.
Really interesting, a niche for me to be able to dive into the business side of things. I just love business. I sit around and talk about business all day long.
Sure.
So yeah, this whole industry is new to me from that sense. But you said something that kind of got me thinking. Usually at this point of the interview, we're talking about like your bucket list, so your 10-year plan, and almost like your exit plan. People who are investing heavily so that they can retire early and have more time freedom. But I've noticed like the kind of person that I want to invest with isn't thinking about those things. And it's almost a red flag to me when someone
Right.
that is offering investments starts talking a lot about how they're going to get out of their job and they're going to have an exit and then they're going to go live on a beach in Mexico for a few years while they figure out phase.
All right.
Yeah. I either want people in your phase where you eat, drink, breathe, sleep the business, or people
Yep.
who are already in phase 2.0. They've already left their grind and they've had a chance to reflect on that sabbatical. And then they're coming back and doing something that's more of a passion business for them. And so instead of telling me about your bucket list and your exit plans and all that, because you probably don't even really have one yet, you almost front loaded that experience before you came to Colombia. And now you're on 2.0 of yourself where you're really pouring everything in there. So walk me through
Yes.
the bucket list for the business over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. The key one for our investors is getting to that IPO in 2026. That's the goal. People look at that, oh, it's an exit opportunity. I think that's not the right way to look at it at all. I think there's two reasons to do an IPO. One is to get the investors some liquidity so that if life circumstances come up and they want to sell some shares, buy more, whatever they need to do on a personal basis. But the real reason why companies should go public is to raise a bunch of capital for future growth. So that's what we want to do. We want to build a business that is sustainable at the time we go public, right? So we've proven that we can be great farmers.
Mhm.
We've proven that we can sell roasted coffee, and we've proven we can sell byproducts, really the alcohol from coffee. At that point, you have a story you could tell the market and say, look, we want to grow this all over the country. We want to buy more farms. We want to buy more coffee from farmers around us. We want to expand the liquor line. We want to expand our presence of roasted coffee, raise a boatload of money, a couple $100 million, and start replicating and growing. That's what we want to do. Our investors invest with us because they want to make money and they want to see when that event is likely to occur. We think that we can get there. At least when I say get there, tell that story to the market and have them believe us that we can execute on the business plan by 2026. At that point, it's how do we grow exponentially after that with the capital behind us that we need to do it. So after that, it's the world is our oyster. We can do something in coffee from a scale standpoint that's never been done before, which is super exciting to me. And the whole time we're building that asset base for downside protection. We're generating a bunch of cash. So if we want to repurchase shares, pay dividends, etc., we really want investors to be with us for the long term, but knowing that we got to show results and get them that option for liquidity in a relatively short time period, because people have options a lot of people want that passive income stream, at least the ability to realize some cash. But our goals for the business don't stop in 2026. It's let's do something where we really leave a mark. That's the goal. That's the bucket list. Exactly what that looks like, I learned a long time ago. I can't predict the future too far in advance.
Even though big opportunities, they come up, sometimes they're very unforeseen when you get a strategic partnership and you have to.
Yeah.
So why 2026 and what's your schedule between now and the roadshow?
Yeah, 2026 was really the story, the timeline that we thought going back to 2017 that we would need to get the business to that kind of shelf stable point that I mentioned.
Mhm.
How long would it take for us to acquire the farms? How long would it take for us to build the infrastructure? How long would it take for us to make the investment in the farms that we need to maximize their production? Excuse me, so that we could get the most out of them. How long would it take for us to build out that roasted coffee channel, and how long would it take for us to prove concept in the alcohol and byproducts business, right? We think that all lines up with that 2026 timeline where somebody can look at it and say, yeah, these guys can execute. We believe that if we give them more capital, they can do what they've already done at a bigger scale. So from here to there, it's really the continue to prove concept and prove the ability to execute in those three verticals. It's the farming, it's the roasted coffee, it's the byproducts.
Mhm. Are there any other geographical areas that you have maybe on the short list, or you get to stick mostly in Colombia?
It's key for us to stay focused. The uniqueness about Colombia is just talk about the US audience, for example. 70% of all of the single origin coffee, but only comes from Honduras. It only comes from Guatemala. It only comes from Brazil. It only comes from Colombia. In the US, 70% of the single origin coffee that's purchased is Colombian.
Mhm.
So the stories and the reputation around Colombian coffee that you started off the conversation with still hold true to this day. So the Juan Valdez commercials,
Yeah.
the image of Colombian coffee as premium over other origins, just the mind recognition for folks. They still think that is the best coffee in the world, especially in the US. And I can agree with that. It's high quality coffee. I think going to other origins, can be a distraction. I want to do what we're really good at, which is Colombian coffee. And also why dilute ourselves with, call it brands, but origin stories that people are not that familiar with. Why spend the time, resources, everything that's required to educate the consumer enough for them to value that origin story as much as they would Colombian? It's better just to I'd say lean into the Colombia story and really push that even more than it already has been.
Yeah. You have that added benefit of brand recognition, even from a non-copy
Yeah,
maker, like I get it.
absolutely.
Perfect. Walk us through what somebody who reaches out to you after the show needs to do to get a hold of you and start to get to know you a little bit better.
Perfect. Yeah, as I mentioned, for accredited investors who are interested in investing with us, we are, I'd say, in the home stretch of the funding round that we currently have going. We started at 15 million. We're down to 6. We got $100,000 minimum commitment. It's really as simple as sending an email to us. It's investor.relations@legacy-group.co. Introduce yourself. Let us know what you want to do. We're happy to add more folks to the investor list and the cap table. As I mentioned, the goal is a 5x return based on the current valuation in that 2026 IPO. So we're excited to work as many people who find the story interesting and believe in the business. We can get you set up with access to the investor portal so you can learn more, see all the offering documents, learn a little bit more about the team. But it's as simple as sending an email, and maybe Emma, if you're able to share it in the notes or just to make it easy for folks. But yeah, we're excited for the future.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, we have that up on the screen. If you are listening to it on an audio, we'll keep it in the show notes. But you can always reach out to me at risecapitalinvestments.co if you need to get advice on guests. And we're in the process of building a website specific to this podcast. So it'll have all of that stuff on it in one easy to find location. But definitely, thanks, Adam, for coming on. I feel like I learned a ton from this episode. And so I appreciate you sharing the story with me, sharing your sustainable journey in commodities growing. It's this fascinating story, and the whole living abroad and the passive income lifestyle that you're able to then go and start a business that you're really passionate about. I think that's just what a lot of our listeners really relate to, whether they've already done it or they aspire to do it. So it's a really great story. So appreciate you sharing that with us.
Fantastic. It's happy to do it. Thanks for the opportunity, Emma.
All right. Now, to you, investor, make sure that you check us out after the show, partnerwithrise.com, to get on a phone call with me or any one of my partners. We got our Monday night meeting, riseclubcapital.com, where we look at deals together, look at deals like what Adam's doing in real estate or business spaces. And we just go through the financials and spreadsheets. And so if you are a discerning investor, but you maybe need a little bit of a accountability from some other people to look through the stuff, or you are a little bit more of a beginner and you are a little confused when you get a pitch deck or a pro forma and you're like, I don't even know how to make an investing decision. That's what our club is for, is to walk you through all that. It's free every Monday night. Would love to see you there. And be sure to go to partnerwithrice.com, like I said, to jump on a phone call with us, or if you need any information about any of the guests that we've had on the show. And so thank you so much for listening. We really are looking forward to hearing from you. The purpose of the show is for networking. It's not just for me and Adam to have a selfish conversation where I get to learn new stuff. It's so that we can network with you. So be sure to reach out after the show and let us know how you're feeling, and let us know about what your next passive adventure is going to look like.